All right, as the countdown to Union Budget 2024-25 has begun, several big questions are being asked. How significant will be the policy shifts this budget? What really is on the agenda? And how will jobs really be impacted? Will the middle class get that much needed tax relief? Well, to answer all those questions for you, we're joined by Jayant Krishna, Senior Economist. Thanks very much for your time, sir. First, the big question that's on everyone's mind. Will this budget bring about significant policy shifts, and will there be financial allocation that will be in focus?
Sakshi, that's an interesting question. We all understand that this time Modi 3.0 is a government which is, a coalition government with two major parties, Telugu Desam and Nitish Kumar's JDU. They are supporting the government, and they are both expecting a major, major financial windfall gain to their respective states, and therefore it remains to be seen, whether the fiscal deficit could be contained. Because if you look at, government has done in the post-COVID era a pretty good job of containing the fiscal deficit. And the expectation is in this budget that Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman announces, the fiscal deficit will be contained to almost 5.3% of the GDP, and the subsequent budget, which is March 2026, ending March 2026, the fiscal deficit will be contained to 4.5%. So that is the expectation. Let's see how it remains to be, how it is done, because all key sectors, be it education, be it healthcare, be it infrastructure, be it rural sector spend, every sector is demanding for an increase. The welfare schemes which the government had announced before elections, especially the free food grains and ration for next 5 years, I think that's going to continue. So it's going to be quite a balancing act. But I would fundamentally believe that I don't see a major policy shift, but some of the reforms which the government, which the people at large and investors at large expect, I think that should be coming. Because if you look at the history of all governments, typically reforms see the light of the day in the first couple of years after the new government comes in, and later, the pace of reforms invariably, whichever party you look at, whichever party's government, that has been the trend. So I would believe that there's some expectation that reforms would get rolled out. The key ones, especially land acquisition, the labor laws become simpler and simpler. In some form, the agro bills which were brought during pandemic and because of political reasons had to be repealed. I think some, if not the laws themselves, but at least some hint that some of the good things which were there in those agriculture reforms, bills, would be brought back in some form or the other. MSME sector is another sector which is trying for reforms, and fundamentally, I would believe that ease of doing business, where our ranking has improved from around 120th to 63rd. I think the finance minister must announce some measures that this ranking can be brought to. I would aspire that the country must look forward to having a ranking of among top 10 ease of doing business nations. So I think these are the broad expectations. No major policy change, but yes, it has to have a reformist undertone. Even though these reforms can't be spelled out clearly in the budget, but some hint of that would be really very, very beneficial.
Right, and the other big question really, of course, NDTV has been speaking to all stakeholders at large. The other big question emerging is tax reliefs and infrastructure investment. Is this really likely, this budget, the infrastructure push and further tax reliefs?
So I think your question has two elements. One is the infrastructure. Yes, I think one, even the adversaries of Modi government would agree that last 10 years have been pretty good from infrastructure point of view. The country can see whenever, I keep traveling all over the country, and wherever I go, I see a country in the making. Everywhere there are flyovers, there are bridges, there are expressways, there are highways. Everywhere you see, airports, newer railway stations. Everywhere you see a huge huge push on infrastructure, which has definitely got intensified in the last 10 years. And but today, if you look at infrastructure, we spend almost 3.4% of our GDP on infrastructure, which is decent, I would say, if you compare with healthcare and education. But most developing countries, when they were setting their infrastructure in order, their spend level used to be 4 to 5%. So can India afford to do that? I think that's one thing. Now, other thing that you asked about the taxation, I would think that when corporate tax, I don't expect any change at all, because earlier the government had rationalized corporate taxes and brought it down quite a lot. So I don't see any further. But the individual, the personal income tax, people are expecting that the standard deduction would be increased to rupees 1 lakh. People are expecting that ATC deductions which are allowed, the limit would go up, and also salaried class and middle class people, they expect that LTA, which is given, I think once in 2 years, it will be brought annual affair. It will be made an annual affair, so that twofold. One is people can travel more, people can do their budget planning more, and the more people travel, the good for the hospitality industry. So I think these expectations are clearly there from a salaried class point of view, Sakshi.
All right, so lots of expectations on that front for sure, like you were explaining. But of course, the spotlight on growth strategy, manufacturing, and job creation at large for India's economy. Your thoughts?
So, Sakshi, manufacturing, despite all manufacturing missions, despite the productivity-linked incentive, the PLI scheme which was launched, and it has been, they have been encouraging responses. I think, but still, if you look at manufacturing sector, just accounts for almost, just about, 15% of our GDP, which is less. If you look at countries like China, South Korea, their percentage is much higher. Their manufacturing contribution to the GDP is much higher. And government of India also has had this aspiration, and also post-COVID, as multinationals all over the world, the manufacturing giants all over the world are contemplating to relocate part of their supply chains to destinations other than China. India has been a forerunner there, and therefore, it is very important that government takes a huge plunge on manufacturing. So for manufacturing, I would believe that PLI, which has been extended to some other areas, I would expect that they extend it, more holistically. This is, to some extent, it applies to apparel industry, textile industry, but the entire apparel manufacturing could be covered in that. The leather industry could be covered in that. Tourism and hospitality also is very important. It does require huge capital investment when it comes to hotels and things like that. And unfortunately, we don't take it as a manufacturing; it's taken as a service industry. But some benefit equivalent of PLI should be there for this industry also, because this is a double-edged thing. Your economy boosts, people travel, makes people happier, and I think these are important things. As far as job creation is concerned, this has been a major concern of the government, that as much as they wanted jobs to go up, it has not happened, and new jobs have been created. Not that they have not been created, but most of the jobs, Sakshi, in our country, people believe almost more than 90% of the jobs are actually in the informal sector and unorganized sector. Now, most of these jobs are not as well paying, and these jobs are not aspirational for people, and therefore it is very important that along with job creation, there is a parallel move to transition a greater part of our economy to formal and organized sector, so that I would have believed that after introduction of GST, the incentive to remain in informal and unorganized sector would reduce, but it hasn't happened to that extent. So I think that push is very important. Formalization of the economy, formalization of the industry, taking more and more things to moving, helping. You can't do it with the overnight. You can't have a dictation, but you could work with the industry and see that what is the reason. Other reason is labor labor laws also. Some people in the industry, they want to get away from the clutches of labor laws, which, despite some recoding and reclassification and all that, continue to be not very friendly to the industry. I think those reforms, if happen and are either doing business improves, I would expect that manufacturing would get a major push, and job market also, with formalization of the economy, these jobs will be more aspirational, and specifically in PLI has to be extended to sectors which are see, if you look at today, India is the second largest producer of Apple iPhones, right? But if you look at their factories, while it is good for the economy in many ways, but from a job creation perspective, perhaps it's not as good as the service industry, because there's a huge degree of automation. So most of the PLI sectors are those where huge degree of automation is there. So therefore, while it definitely has given a boost to the economy, but it has not been as good as expected, on the job creation front. So I think every incentive that the government rolls out has to be looked at from job creation perspective. And mind you, more jobs are there in service sector, in not in the manufacturing sector. As of date, India has a far greater, kitty of jobs in the services sector. And we are, while we keep talking about manufacturing sector and think services sector will grow on its own, but I think there has to be adequate focus for service sector also, because in sectors like IT, sectors like IT enabled services, telecom, banking, financial services, insurance, and so on and so forth. These are sectors, where they are they're human intensive, they're manpower intensive sectors, and for every crore of investment made, the incremental jobs are far more than what they are in the manufacturing sector. So both have to go hand in hand.
Right, so that's very, very crucial going forward for India's economy, like you've just explained. But if I were to ask you, what is your message to the finance minister then for boosting this job creation across sectors? Like you said, that look, every announcement really should somewhere focus on job creation. So if I were to ask you, okay, what is your message to the finance minister? What do you think we can do this budget to enhance that further?
So I think my wish list to the finance minister would be that reduce the freebies, reduce the welfare measures, keep them only those which are for people from at the bottom of the pyramid, rather than large multitude of people, and also, as I said earlier, invest more in creating incentives, including PLI, for the manufacturing industry, for the service sector. I would expect that some incentive government can look at all units, be it manufacturing, be it service sector, and it should be, the incentives should now be linked to the number of additional jobs created. That's very, very important. Generally, incentives are given based on the capital deployed and so on and so forth, and the land and so on and so forth. But I think it's very, very important that what jobs a new unit is going to guarantee and how many jobs see the light of the day. And for every 100 jobs created, there could be a financial incentive given by the government. It could be a PLI version 2. And I would say not just production, but production as well as service sector industries which create jobs. There could be an incentive, and not for life. If you give this incentive for 3 years time, those jobs remain in the economy, not forever. That government doesn't keep losing that money for all times to come. A purely job, the new jobs created linked incentive covering both service and manufacturing sector. That would be my advice to the finance minister, because jobs are very, very important, and there is no way any government can ignore the need to create jobs, and not just that, all reforms that we talked about, land, labor, MSME sector reforms, they all are going to help in creation of jobs, because it's the MSME sector. If you look at, it creates an employment for about 12 crore people, more than the large manufacturing sector and service sector. So I think that sector cannot be neglected, because that has a huge propensity to create jobs, even more than the bigger units.
Right, and you have, of course, mentioned welfare spending. Now, the big question really is being asked that welfare spending or capital expenditure, which way will this budget to Union Budget 2024-25 go? Your thoughts?
So that's a tricky one. I think it's a huge balancing act, Sakshi. Welfare measures can't go away all of a sudden because that was the electoral promise which the government made, and they have to carry on. But very clearly, and I would say there's a difference between welfare measures and freebies. Freebies are those which can be done away with altogether. Welfare measures have a much larger social agenda, and it helps people at the bottom of the pyramid. So I would believe that the welfare measures, for example, just to tell you, if in a state, or let's say the bus ride is made free for women, right? Some may think that it's a freebie, but I would say it's a welfare measure because there have been studies which show that if you make commuting easier and cheaper for women, the women's participation in labor force goes up by as much. So there is a thin dividing line between the freebies and welfare measures. I am not in favor of freebies, but I'm surely in favor of welfare measures, and there has to be a very, very tightrope walk, which Nirmala Sitharaman must has, and and let's see how she delivers. It's not easy, as I said earlier. The usual compulsions of doing this balancing act are there. Containment of GDP, that pressure is there, and of course, being dependent on two major regional parties is also another challenge, because they would have, obviously, they would extract their pound of flesh, if I was allowed to use that term, for supporting the government.
Right. Now, the other question really being asked then is, what can the budget hold for different sectors? Remember, startups are eyeing an angel tax relief. The health tech sector at large is eyeing an increased funding altogether. Startups, of course, playing a crucial role there in driving economic growth and job creation as well as innovation. So, your thoughts?
So I would think that startups are very, very important for the country. I mean, if today India already has the third largest set of startups, next only to the US and China, and the ecosystem is very, very conducive to startups, their growth and so on and so forth. We keep hearing how every couple of months there are new startups which move and become unicorns. By virtue of their revenues. So I think it's very, very important that we nourish them and we encourage them. Make ease of doing business very, very easy. Improve the ease of doing business for them. And as you rightly said, angel tax is very, very important. That needs to be looked at. And what was the other thing other than startup that you asked, Sakshi?
The health tech sector looking at
Yeah,
increased
yeah,
funding.
yeah. Yeah. So I think these sectors, health, if you look at, we as a country, we just spend about 2.1% of our GDP on health. I'm talking about the public expenditure, the government, both federal, the central government and state governments put together, they spent almost 2.1% of their GDP, of the country's GDP on healthcare. Education, if you look at, it is slightly better, just about 3% of GDP is the public expenditure, the government expenditure of Government of India and states put together on this. Science and technology research, we spend just about 0.7% of our GDP on this. Now these have to go up substantially. All developed countries spend at least 5 to 6% of their GDP on education. All of them spend almost 4-5% of their GDP on healthcare, and some of them, for some countries, this figure is even in double digits, both for healthcare and education. So I think you have to improve that, because let's not lose the larger side also. The Prime Minister Modi has very clearly embarked upon a mission to that India emerges as a developed country by the year 2047. Now, how would it become developed? Unless we improve the spending on education, skill development, healthcare, scientific research, and so on and so forth, how would it happen? I mean, we are today the fifth largest economy. In a couple of years, or 3 years, 4 years down the line, we'll become the third largest economy. But the question that we really need to ask is our economy driven by innovation? Now, how would it be driven by innovation unless the quality of research and development in science and technology space that happens, of that level? Human Development Index, our rank is quite low among all countries in the world. Per capita income, our rank is quite low. I mean, it is very good to say we are the fifth largest economy, but what is the per capita income? The Human Development Index, which largely depends on the quality of healthcare, healthcare, education, skills, quality of life indicators, there again a substantive improvement is required if we were to become a developed country, and which cannot happen unless you improve allocations to these sectors big time. That is education, health, definitely, and to some extent even science and technology if we want to become a innovation-led economy. So I think these, I know all these are difficult issues, and all solutions can't come out of one budget itself. But the budget must herald a change, a directional change. It must herald, that yes, education, we know you can't make it 3% to 6% overnight, but could it become 3.5% and do some balancing act somewhere else? So that the direction is very, very clear. Any change will happen, for 4 or 5 years. It can't happen overnight. I think that's very important, for these changes. If India has to eventually emerge as a developed country in foreseeable future, let's say, in 20 years time, or little 20, 25 years time, that's very, very important to my mind.
Absolutely, absolutely. And speaking of a roadmap and a vision, the finance minister also during the interim budget outlining Viksit Bharat 2047, the broad roadmap there, and saying that look, in the full budget, a comprehensive roadmap will be talked about for achieving Viksit Bharat. Your thoughts on the comprehensive plan really and roadmap at large?
Yeah, so I think aspiration which the Prime Minister has built is very, very good, undoubtedly. But clearly, a broad roadmap can be there in the budget, but eventually a detailed roadmap can only be done with a panel of experts over a period of time. It can't happen overnight, because it's very easy for somebody to say you spend as much in education, you spend as much in healthcare, but where does the money come? Money doesn't grow on trees at all. I mean, you can't cut the rural spending, you can't cut the infrastructure spending. State allocations are very important, especially in a coalition government. So how do you do? So I think that the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister have to pick up the brightest of the brains in the country, and they have to work along with government. And not the brightest of the brains do not necessarily reside within the government. There are very good people within the government, but there are equally good people outside the government, and they have to create a task force which sets this agenda and figures out that what are the elements which must change in the way our economy is run, if we have to become the developed country. That's very, very important. The broad directions can be included in the budget, but the detailed action plan, that can only happen. And the new government has just come to power, barely little over a month old. So I think it is, it will take time. But I would think, in next 6 months' time, a special task force, or empowered task force, I would recommend the government to set up, and they go into every nuance of what needs to make us a developed country, and then presents to the Prime Minister and the senior ministers, before the government accepts, yes, these things are doable and these are not, and then take the country forward. I'm an optimist. I feel, India can do very well. India is taken very seriously among the Committee of Nations today. When I started my career, I remember people used to, and when I used to go travel abroad for meetings, business meetings or conferences, people used to wonder, what this Indian would do here. After all, it's a country of snakes and snake charmers and beggars. I've seen with every passing year of my career how that view has changed, and today India as a country and Indians are taken very, very seriously. And then one clear example is IT sector. I mean, no IPO in IT sector will see the light of the day anywhere in Silicon Valley or elsewhere unless it has written the India story. How does it want to leverage India? I think it's very, very important. No financial institutions will give a loan to a tech company unless they have clearly specified that, how would they take care of cost arbitrage and quality arbitrage by leveraging India big time. So I think that kind of leadership which IT and ITS have been able to build, with a huge 45 to 50% of the outsourceable markets size share, earned by them. I think similar, endeavors are required in every other sector, including some of the manufacturing, areas as well. Like in iPhone, it's already there. Samsung India is the largest producer. Apple will be the second largest producer. So I would think that we have perhaps already become the second largest mobile manufacturer in the world. So I think more and more sectors there has to be an aspiration. There has to be very, very important the set of people leading it. They have to be the brightest of the lot, and with them and fire in the belly, I'm sure India has a huge a great future ahead. If we travel in that direction with the velocity it needs. It's pretty very important that we don't have a time. The demographic dividend or whatever we keep talking about, we don't have an endless window unless we do it now, starting now. Posterity will never forgive us for our tardiness. So it's very, very important that we take bold decisions, we have a reformist attitude, and the velocity of decision making is much, much faster and in the interest of the country.
Absolutely, and like you said, perceptions changing, India's economy outperforming, and the spotlight really on budget 2024-25. Thanks very much for sharing your thoughts and all your expectations. And of course, we will continue to track how the economy performs and what budget 2024-25 is all about.
Thank you, Sakshi.